probably do it at some point. Maybe in the sun,
exactly.
maybe in the south.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah.
So, Manfred, if you could describe to me what Brockwood Park School is to you, and also why you've chosen or why you've decided to suggest it, or to send your daughter here, or to suggest that you come here.
Yeah, well, it was actually a long process because we were looking for a school that would somehow provide a continuation of Laura's education, which took largely, not only but largely place in Waldorf schools in Spain, and there was a reason why we thought that's the right type of preparation of kids for the future at large, if you want. So a rather undominating, unauthoritative environment, and there's very few examples of middle school institutions that follow those principles, and somehow we figured out that in the UK there are a couple such schools, and we visited them, and Brockwood really came out on top because it's a very special place, partly for the obvious reason that the person who founded the institution here was a quite enlightened scholar, and so that's built into the foundation of the ethical principles and the structural ideas a little bit. But getting closer to it, I got more and more fascinated. So I'm trying to visit the school to understand even more. What's the secret sauce here? I mean, how they really do it, the constituting principles, and what I found so far is just very encouraging. I think this institution holds some of the keys for the future of education in general, and it would be wonderful if that the insights that have been derived here over the last 40 years of successful history of that institution could be made available for the public school systems, which are overdue for reform, as we know, where a hell of a lot of money is spent on pretty useless education, which produces frustrated kids, frustrated teachers, and, well, all along, a frustrated society. And here, this is a living experiment. I mean, it's a social laboratory. People who come here for the first time maybe don't know exactly what to expect, because sometimes they come based on a recommendation of somebody that it's good. What does good mean? And at the same time, it's the overarching question that we have to ask ourselves in a civilization that is on the edge of destroying the foundations of our life. So what's good education that can maybe get us out of the current trap and complicated situation? And an obvious structural approach is questioning the vertical structures that have been dominating our society for such a long time, vertical bureaucracies. And Brockwood embodies the opposite. It's a complete paradigm shift. It's a flat structure. It's anti-authoritarian. It's collaborative. It's basic democracy. I mean, democracy is another cultural value that we all know on the macro scale, on a government scale, is in a deep crisis. It's been taken over by special interests. It needs urgent reform. And on the other end, the very basic democratic idea of having consensual information, consensual decision-making processes and stuff like that, giving kids the opportunity in this critical period of their lives, where they transform from being kids and teenagers into young adults, to give them a couple of years of exposure to an environment where they collaborate with adults, where they design their own curriculums, where there is no pressure to do exams, where they choose whether they do exams, where they choose their own learning path, is an amazing opportunity for them to unconsciously learn a different way of dealing with each other, at the same time develop an educational path that is much more likely to take them in a direction that keeps their passion alive for the rest of their work life, because most of the educational investigation is centered around what would you really like to do? And you can try different things. You can change direction after the first year, and then you explore another path. But it's a much higher probability to find something you like than in a vertically structured information indoctrination, which I would say is the average public school model. So it's beneficial on so many levels, and at the same time actually quite revolutionary if you think about the horizontal structure that they propose to the whole decision-making process, and they really live it. I mean, when you're here, when you participate in those parents' weekends, you can see how they live it with small rituals, with honest passion to question it again and again. I mean, working with teenagers at that age is like being in a lion cage in a way. There's a lot of energy. And they don't use whips; they have silk gloves, basically, to work in this specific lion cage. And it's beautiful to see, because they question their work all the time. So it's evolving; the system is evolving, but it remains true to non-dominating principles, anti-authoritarian, democratic principles, and that's a huge learning for everybody involved. It's beautiful.
Well,
so, what's missing?
Well, I mean, you've hit on so many points there. It was fantastic.
Yeah, so I thought you can cut it, and just take what you want, and even
really
can slot in a question, on some of the stuff. Just wanted to get over with it.
Yeah. The only maybe there are just two things I would ask you about that jump to mind, and one is the Perspective Week here, and the second is the Parents' Weekend that you're currently on.
Yes.
So maybe if you could tell me about those two aspects.
Well, from a personal experience, the Prospective Week was a wonderful experience.
Maybe if I could ask you to stop for a second and just give maybe 2 seconds between when I talk and
Sure.
when you reply, because it'll just be difficult to cut in. So if you could tell me about the Perspective Week and the Parents' Weekend.
Yeah, no, the Prospective Week is a very important institution, a very important structural element. Because nobody wants to send his kids to a place he doesn't know, the kids don't know. And also to give kids 5 or 6 days to see how it feels. And also the community here, I mean, it's to see whether there's a sufficient cultural fit to keep this together in a way. And for us it was a wonderful experience, because Laura has always been in the nest, right? And that's another part of that experience in the growth process of young people, to step outside the nest a little bit, and to have the possibility here in such a progressive environment to experiment the next stage of leaving the nuclear family and engaging in a wider family, which it really is all the way, but very mature, run by adults and co-students and basically, so that's a great experience. But since it's also especially for kids from the continent, it's important to take that time, those couple of days. And Laura was crying the first 2 days. I mean, I called her I think I dropped her off on Thursday, and then Thursday evening she was sobbing on the phone. Friday evening she was sobbing on the phone. Daddy, I don't know. Then I couldn't reach her until Tuesday. I tried to call her, no call from her, no lost calls. And on Tuesday I finally reached her, and I said, Laura, what's on? Did your phone break? Or, Daddy, it's fantastic. I have a project. I already know what I want to do. So you want to stay there? Yes, of course. So it just took 2 days. And other kids, it may take longer, maybe even when they start. But it's for me very hard to imagine that this is not a conducive environment for the development of a 14-year-old, 14 to whatever, 15, 16, 17. Because I often hear, it fits for some kids. I can't relate to that element of doubt. If we believe that this type of culture, and it's really a cultural paradigm shift, may be the future of society at large, how we should deal with each other, how we should organize our decision-making processes, how we should distribute power and wealth in society, then it fits for every kid, then because it holds the key learnings that we will need in the future.
Okay, and
Yeah.
could you tell me what you feel now since Laura has been here? What do you think has happened for her, at least as you see it as a parent in her time here? Because she's been here now for a year and a half, right? So could you describe that journey to me?
Yeah, she's been here for a year and a half.
And if you could maybe mention her name at the start, or just say my daughter has been here for a year and a half.
My
So
daughter.
I'll ask again. So yeah.
Yeah, my daughter Laura has been here for a year and a half now. And the main changes I observe is that apart from obviously having tremendously improved her English, so that's for Spanish speakers or German speakers, that's a big benefit, but you get that from most schools in the UK. The second thing is an enormous maturity that I observe in her. She became calmer, she's very reflective. She's able to present an argument, to have a discussion. The self-confidence has risen. It's just no problem at all to step in front of a bunch of adults and make her case on whatever it may be, right? And I see a lot of, when I'm here on Parents' Weekend, I see a lot of even younger kids, like 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds. Laura is 17 now. Who show an amazing maturity simply in how they deal in an adult environment when they have to participate in a discussion in one of the inquiries that are part of the regular curriculum here. And that's just very encouraging to see. I mean, and it carries over in the coursework. I mean, the type of presentations they do based on their own investigation, the project-based work. It's all elements that, if you think about it, I mean, naturally bring back the spirit of the original idea of academia and of how a research and learning process should ideally be, a collaborative research process. And it's so obvious that whatever you learn under such circumstances in a fearless environment where you are self-motivated, which is really the underlying dynamic that needs to get into motion here, this idea of finding a field of interest, possibly finding a passion for life that will carry you through the following educational phases, and through that, without even thinking about it, finding the energy to dig really deep. And everything you learn in such an environment, in those processes, sticks for life. I mean, comparing it to the exam-driven information storage that is then called off at an exam, and we know it, we all went through the conventional process, how steep the forgetting curve really is after usually a week after the exam, 50-60% is gone, and it may never come back, and the rest probably is gone a half year later, and only when you get to university and then you reassemble your thoughts, and then you start to learn something in a different way, and then things start to stick more deeply. But it's a very, very encouraging development on a both personal level and on an academic level.
And so, do you have concerns for Laura's future? How do you feel about her life for her after Brockwood?
Well, me personally, not at all. But I noticed that.
And if you could include the question in the statement by saying, for instance, I don't have a concern for Laura's future, just so I can edit myself out. So.
Yeah. Okay. So that you orientate yourself in our stream.
Yes, exactly.
I'm personally not at all concerned about Laura's future after Brockwood. I mean, I'm concerned about the future of society going forward, and that's another story. But not about her personal preparation. But I notice a lot, and when I'm here with other parents, that many people are really concerned. Whether the academic level is at par with other institutions, and whether the kids are prepared for university, and life is so tough out there, and here it's like maybe too cozy. I hear that stuff, and I just recommend people to think deeply what's really happening here. I mean, what is the formation, the social formation that the kids receive? It's turning them into the citizens you want in a mature democracy, people who can think for themselves, who are not afraid to stand up for their opinion, who respect others, who are used to collaborative work environments, to consensual decision-making processes, and from an early age, and actually practicing it on a nearly daily basis. This is an amazing. These are amazing qualities, and I wouldn't even call them soft skills. Sometimes here, so I think that's very hard social skills that will be needed in the future. And if you think about the changes in the workplace, I mean, how quickly, driven by technology, acceleration processes, structural changes in society, how quickly professional profiles change at the moment. Everybody out there knows it's permanent learning. We will have to learn all the time because we're living on an exponential technological rocket, if you want, and as a civilization, as a whole. So you need to learn how to learn without being afraid, adopting new knowledge, new techniques, most likely through your whole life, and ideally in a field that really interests you. And the probability, because otherwise you won't have the energy to relearn and relearn again. If you happen to discover this field, then you are where the future of corporations is, I believe, and which is not jobs. People need to have lifestyles instead of jobs, and this institution here is the likelihood to discover something that you could later on call a lifestyle rather than a job. That's basically part of the endeavor. That's the whole endeavor. Let's discover not just your talents, your interest, and tickle it and develop it. And you, once you are on that track, even if you haven't fully embarked on your next adventure, but the technique, the learning technique, the thinking technique, to look at life as something where you want to make a contribution, and where you want to do something where you can connect with your whole self. This is something that is built very deeply into the DNA of this institution, this quest, and learning to ask the right questions. I mean, it is an early philosophical training in a certain way, without dogmatically presenting it like that. And I think that's the best preparation for the future that we are all going towards on many levels.
And so, if I could just ask you, and because we got interrupted, unfortunately, with the gentleman passing in the door, and not to go over ground a second time too much, but if I could just bring us back to what you were talking about just there, about Laura's being prepared for the future and choosing what will fulfill her in her career, and learning what that is and how Brockwood might help her to do that. I wonder if we could just focus on that area just once again, and don't worry if you repeat yourself, because I might have to cut it out.
I think that's hardly, that didn't really bother, but okay. Sure, let's...
Yeah, so if you could tell me how you think that Brockwood will help her in that way. Brockwood
is... we're losing a little bit the flow.
Yeah.
I'm not worried about Laura's future after Brockwood, because I see Brockwood as an institution that ideally prepares its students for the rapid changes that the future workplace is undergoing, where degrees won't matter so much, where personal qualities of teamwork, of collaborative spirit, of knowing how to delve into new knowledge, about relearning, adopting new techniques is part of the core program and attitude here at the Institute. That's what the kids really learn. And I think that's the ideal preparation for a future workplace. Self-confidence, knowing how to learn, asking the right questions, and find fields of interest that really fulfill you, and work in those, which will give you the energy to keep up with that continuous relearning and challenging process that at least what the current near future looks like that we're going to embark on.
Okay, thank you.
I tried.
Yeah, no, that's
Well,
great.
is anything missing? I mean, you have to really cut out the gems and make it short, right?
Yeah, but I mean, it's all gems.
Yeah, I could say we need more Brockwoods for Gopal. We need a lot more Brockwoods, and how are we going to do that? You know, how can we have 100 schools like that, or more, and how can we make the learnings and also the failures of the first 40 years of that lifestyle academy, of that social lab, I would say, available to a broader public, to people who are thinking about public school reform, which is a necessary step, and how to make it accessible. That's really for me an interesting point.
So can I ask, do you think what is happening in Brockwood, yes, needs to be shared in the outside world, and why and how could it be done? I know you've kind of answered the beginning of that question already, but just to give you the general question.
Yeah, no, I think the educational concept, if you want to call it that, that Brockwood has developed based on the ideas of Krishnamurti, and the school it has become over those 40 years of obviously continuous evolution, is a very rich inspiration for educational concepts in general, and it could inspire changes in the public school system. It's, of course, it's quite, it's very easy. I mean, Bill Mollison, the founder of permaculture, once said that we have very complex problems, but it's amazing how easy the solutions actually are. And if we look at society in general, we have a series of seemingly extremely complex problems. But we could probably, and as a lot of sociologists are starting to think in that direction, that probably the core structural problem we have is how we deal with each other. Domination of humans by humans could be one of these core structural problems. Dysfunctional democracies are, in a way, something like that, and we are on the macro level in a real crisis mode. What this institution proposes is a radical basic democratic approach to learning, to dealing with each other. Right, everybody's on the same level. People meet at 10 o'clock in the community room and share their issues for the day, and end it with a silence meditation. Important questions are tabled in a mixed forum of staff and students. So, well, we are training the elements of a healthy democracy here, and of a fearless environment. So on a broader social level, things like a UBI, universal basic income, are emerging. Tools that would take a lot of pressure and fear out of the larger system. And then again, how do we really restructure in a broader sense? So institutions like this are experimenting for quite a long time, and it seems subtle and on a small level. But the learning, I mean, we're talking about mechanics, about social mechanics. It doesn't matter that will scale up. The core insights are relevant. And I think there should be a lot more educational institutions working with those ideas. There's a couple of, especially in England, do have a couple of progressive schools. They're all a bit different. There should be more best practice exchange, I think, and to eventually come to a point where this type of preparation for the future becomes available for a much broader audience, because it still tends to be kind of an elite education. Unfortunately, it's quite expensive, although you have this fantastic high level of support, like 15%, I think, the highest in the UK, which is wonderful. but it still is a very, very limited small field trial, I would say. And if you look at the world, it was my first question when I came here. I said, "Wow, this is the future of education." Just clicked. How do we get 100 schools out there, or at least inspire other people who want to start educational projects and share the best practice? And that's, I think that would be a great contribution of Brockwood, on top of carrying on with the good work.
Great. Okay.
You got some material?
Fantastic. And it was
Maybe you
very-
can show it to me